Today we delve into a landmark case that reshaped the contours of Indian democracy. Welcome to the story of the Lily Thomas case, a pivotal moment in the nation's legal history. This case holds immense significance in Indian polity, challenging the very foundations of political accountability and integrity.
To understand the gravity of the Lily Thomas case, we must first look at the political climate of the time. The early 2000s were a period of intense political activity and public scrutiny. Political rallies were frequent, and debates often turned heated as the nation grappled with numerous issues. Parliamentary sessions were marked by fierce discussions and sometimes even walkouts by opposition parties. The political landscape was charged, and the public was becoming increasingly aware of the need for transparency and accountability in governance. The early 2000s were marked by widespread concerns over corruption and the criminalization of politics. News channels were flooded with reports of corruption scandals involving high-profile politicians. Courtrooms became the stage for dramatic legal battles as politicians were summoned to answer for their alleged misdeeds. Public protests against political corruption became a common sight, with citizens demanding cleaner governance and stricter laws to curb the influence of money and muscle power in politics. The atmosphere was ripe for a significant legal intervention. At the heart of this case lies Section 8, Subsection 4, of the Representation of the People Act, 1951. This particular section was a focal point of many legal debates and discussions. It was designed to address the eligibility of individuals to contest elections and hold public office. Legal documents and courtroom scenes from that era show the intense scrutiny this provision was under. Politicians often discussed the implications of this law in their speeches, highlighting its importance in maintaining the integrity of the electoral process. This provision allowed convicted legislators to continue in office, pending appeal, which often led to prolonged legal battles and a lack of immediate accountability. The loophole meant that even those found guilty of serious crimes could remain in power, sometimes for years, while their appeals dragged on. This situation led to widespread frustration among the public and calls for reform. Legal proceedings in Parliament often focused on this issue, with lawmakers debating the need for stricter laws. Protests for legislative accountability became more frequent, as citizens demanded that their representatives be held to higher standards. Court hearings for convicted legislators were closely followed by the media, adding to the pressure for change. The Lily Thomas case emerged as a pivotal moment in this context, challenging the status quo and pushing for a more accountable political system.
The petitioners in this case were Lily Thomas, a dedicated advocate, and Lok Prahari, a determined non-governmental organization. Their motivations were clear and rooted in a desire to uphold the sanctity of the legislative process. They argued that Section 8, Subsection 4, was a loophole that enabled convicted politicians to evade immediate disqualification, thus undermining the democratic principles of transparency and accountability.
The Supreme Court's judgment in this case was nothing short of landmark. The court clearly articulated its ruling, stating that Section 8, Subsection 4 of the Representation of the People Act was unconstitutional. This section, which allowed convicted lawmakers to continue in office during the pendency of their appeals, was struck down. The rationale was simple, yet profound. Allowing convicted individuals to hold office undermines the integrity of the democratic process.
The implications of this judgment were immediate and far-reaching. The courtroom was filled with a palpable sense of tension and anticipation as the verdict was read. This landmark decision sent shockwaves through the political landscape, signaling a new era of accountability and transparency. In the short term, it meant that several sitting lawmakers who had been convicted but were appealing their cases had to vacate their positions. This created a sudden vacuum in the political arena, leading to a series of by-elections and reshuffling of political alliances. The public watched closely as these developments unfolded, hoping for a cleaner and more honest political environment. In the long term, the judgment played a crucial role in curbing political corruption and upholding the integrity of public office. It set a precedent that discouraged corrupt practices and encouraged ethical behavior among public officials. The ripple effects of this decision were felt across various levels of government, from local councils to national assemblies. It also inspired similar legal reforms in other jurisdictions, amplifying its impact beyond the immediate context. By ensuring that only those with clean records could serve, the Supreme Court reinforced the foundational values of our democracy. This decision was not just about punishing the guilty, it was about restoring faith in the system. Citizens began to feel that their voices mattered and that justice could prevail. The judgment also sparked a broader conversation about the need for continuous vigilance and reform to protect the integrity of public institutions. It reminded everyone that democracy is a living entity that requires constant nurturing and protection.
When we look at the judgment critically, we see a range of perspectives. The courtroom was filled with intense debates and discussions, reflecting the complexity of the issue at hand. Legal experts and political analysts alike weighed in, each bringing their own unique viewpoints to the table. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation as everyone awaited the final verdict. On the positive side, it was hailed as a significant step towards cleaner politics. Politicians and activists celebrated the judgment, seeing it as a victory for transparency and accountability. The ruling was seen as a beacon of hope for those advocating for ethical governance. Crowds cheered as leaders spoke passionately about the potential for a new era in politics, one where integrity and honesty would prevail. However, some critics pointed out potential limitations and loopholes. Legal experts dissected the judgment, highlighting areas where it fell short. They argued that while the intentions were noble, the execution left much to be desired. Political critics were quick to identify gaps that could be exploited, raising concerns about the effectiveness of the ruling in the long run. For instance, the judgment did not address the issue of frivolous or politically motivated convictions. This oversight sparked protests and debates, with many arguing that the ruling could be used as a tool for political vendettas. Activists took to the streets, demanding safeguards to prevent misuse. The conversation shifted to the need for a more comprehensive approach that would protect individuals from unjust persecution. Expert opinions from sources like Drishti IS highlight these nuances, suggesting that while the judgment was a step in the right direction, there is still room for further reforms. Panels of experts convened to discuss the implications, offering insights into how the ruling could be improved. They emphasized the importance of continuous evaluation and adaptation to ensure that the judgment serves its intended purpose. The dialogue underscored the complexity of political and legal reforms, reminding us that progress is often incremental and requires persistent effort.
To sum up, the Lily Thomas case stands as a pivotal moment in the fight against political corruption in India. For UPSC aspirants, it is a critical example of how judicial interventions can strengthen democratic processes. As we continue to reflect on this case, it prompts us to ask, how can we further ensure that our representatives are truly deserving of our trust?